There we go. Welcome everybody to our Learning and Skills Scrutiny meeting, Monday 15th of January. Welcome to you all, and a special welcome. I don't think, oh yes, Carol has joined us, Councillor Carol. Welcome, Carol. Welcome to this committee. We hope you enjoy your time with us, and thank you for swelling our ranks. We are still one committee member short. I'm a little bit frustrated about it because we have been for some time. The political balance says it's a Liberal Democrat, so I can encourage you all out there that have connections with that. I have written to the leader and informed him that we would like our committee to have the full numbers. It's particularly frustrating because we lost Councillor Gareth, who was our vice chair. So Councillor Gareth isn't no longer with us, but I would like to thank Gareth for being my vice chair over the previous 12 months. But obviously, due to the political balance, he's been removed, and I don't think he wanted to be, but that's the situation as it stands. So Glyn, Carol, Pete, please, we're still short of a member. If you can't fill it with a Liberal Democrat, we make that plea there out there to you that we suggest you do something else so that we can get our scrutiny committee up to the level which it should be. Okay, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Lynette Lovell, Director of Education, and Nancy Owen from Finance, but we've got Mary and Jenny here.
Good.
I haven't received any other apologies.
Welcome to all officers with us today. We're very grateful. Any other apologies? No. Good. Just make a note that Councillor Sue may be leaving early, and we're still waiting for Margaret to come in as well. So hopefully those will be rectified before we finish the meeting. Item 2 on your agenda is disclosure of interest. Any member got anything they wish to declare? And similarly at item 3, declarations of party web. Judging on your silence, that nobody has anything to declare on either items. Item 4 on your agenda is election of vice chair. Members, this has been with us for some time now. Councillor Lucy Roberts has been asked if she would consider it by myself. I think she's more than willing to stand, but members, I will make it open. Is there anybody else that wishes to receive a nomination? If not,
I'd like to nominate Councillor Lucy if she's happy and willing to do it, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. If somebody will second that, we'll go to Councillor Lucy to see if she will accept that role. Would anybody second it? Show of hand.
I'll second that.
Well, Councillor Gain and Councillor Carol, thank you, and Councillor Danny. So, Councillor Lucy, I know I've had a quick chat with you, and I think you're more than happy to take on the role.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Bimber. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. So Lucy will be the vice chair for the next, well, as long as it's required.
Might not be long.
Well, let's put it like that. Yeah, let's see what the future brings, but more than capable of taking on that role. Item 5 on the agenda, we've got considerable minutes before us. Firstly, the minutes of the 13th of September. They're pages 3 to 16 in the pack. Can I just have a proposal for accuracy in the first instance?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
Chair.
And a seconder? And I assume all in favour? Members, is there any comments on those minutes of the 13th? No. If not, we'll move on to the minutes of the 20th of September. They're pages 16 to 38 in the pack. Proposal for accuracy?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Sue. And a seconder? Yes, thank you, Carol. Members, all in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any comments on their minutes?
No.
No, and then we move on to the minutes of the 17th of October, pages 38 to 50. Again, for accuracy. Proposer?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Lucy, and seconder.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, and all in favour. I would like to thank you very much. Those minutes have all been accepted. And any comments on that last group of minutes? Thank you. I would like to thank Kath on this instance. Really, these are very comprehensive minutes and very detailed and very lengthy, and quite some effort to put them all together. Really, so very important that they're logged in the manner in which they are. So thanks, Kath.
Thank you, Chair.
They took some time reading just to ratify them all, really. So to create them, quite an effort. Thank you. Item 6 on your agenda is the school funding formula. This will be going forward to Cabinet, and this page is 51 to 144 in the back. Comprehensive read. Councillor Pete, Councillor David, any comments on these prior to going over to officers?
I think I'll just introduce the session. As most of you will be aware, the school funding formula is established each year. There is a review group that meets early in September, identifying work programmes in relation to the formula that are either put forward by officers or from the schools community itself. This year, the main pieces of work that came forward are in relation to the additional learning needs funding and funding around deprivation. I've got a number of officers with me today. Georgie Bevan, Sarah Cobell, Mary Thomas and Simon Anderson, who will be taking you through in more detail about each of the different aspects. Chair, with your leave, I believe they have a short presentation. I would suggest to you that they take you through each of the change areas and then you have a look at those in turn, rather than giving you the whole presentation first.
Yeah, no, more than happy to address it in the manner which you suggested. Yeah, if you're finished, Pete, we'll go over to Georgie.
Jochen Chair, thank you, Councillor Pete. Yep, we've got a presentation that we'll be running. Both myself, Sarah and Simon will be delivering on different sections of it because we led on different things, but collectively as SSMT, we worked very closely with the members of the Budget Forum, as well as our schools around the changes as part of the consultation. So Sarah, would you like to start the presentation? Jochen Val?
There we go, Sarah. That's up with us.
So as Councillor Pete said, we have the formula review consultation. It does form part of the Budget Forum work that we do and how we use the Budget Forum to ensure that the formula is adapting to the needs of the services, but also the schools. So predominantly this is about school funding, but as the service, we take the feedback from the schools and then we suggest changes or look at evidence that we've got. So the formula review consultation was sent before Christmas, and it was asking schools for their views on the following areas. The first one was the changes to the way the formula distributes the notional additional learning needs funding in both the primary and secondary phase mainstream formulae. Simon's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but the main element of this was we'd had feedback from schools regarding additional funding and the funding they needed with ALN, and also how we mirrored other LAs moving forward. B was about changing the way the formula distributes funding based on a factor of deprivation in both the primary and secondary phase mainstream formulae. Again, Sarah's going to talk through this section with us today, but we'd identify specific elements linked to deprivation that we felt we needed to address. And again, we'd had that feedback from schools as well. Finally, the C was the changes to the way the formula distributes funding for premises in both the primary and secondary phase mainstream formulae. Mari's going to talk through that section of the presentation, but it is around, and again, elements of things we'd identified with schools, cooking for other schools, etc., and anything linked to that. Diolch, Sarah. So Simon, I'm going to hand over to you, if that's okay, to start the consultation of the ALM principles in our formula.
Diolch, Georgie. Thanks everybody for giving us the opportunity to talk through this today. I think it's best to start off really that our premise behind looking again, as Georgie mentioned, at the funding for ALN was one of a moral obligation, largely, that we need to make sure that the learners in our schools who are most vulnerable have the appropriate funding to be able to meet their needs. And that involves our learners with additional learning needs, but also our learners that come from areas of high deprivation as well. So really it's about creating that fair and inclusive educational system that directly supports our learners with ALN, and ultimately that will lead to improved educational outcomes and have an impact in a wider sense on social and behavioural benefits as well. Often we're told by head teachers that there's insufficient funding directed specifically at diverse needs for learners in mainstream schools. And also heads often highlight that there's a lack of funding equity that hinders them in making long-term decisions in order to support the needs of their most vulnerable learners in their schools. So by looking at this formula, we are proposing that a change would help support head teachers to make those long-term decisions, to make those school-specific decisions, and further support learners with ALN and those vulnerable children and young people. Thanks, Sarah. If we move on to the next slide. So by looking at the methodology and how we distribute that notional ALM funding to schools, what we're suggesting is that instead of the local authority maintaining a pot for emergencies, for schools to apply for, we are proposing delegating the entire notional ALN funding to schools. We would, of course, have to keep a very small pot in reserve just in case there are exceptional circumstances. So that's children and young people moving into county who've got significantly complex needs, or if a child or young person suffers a life-changing medical incident. Those would be the only reasons we would keep any additional funding back. The benefits of delegating the majority of that ALN funding to schools can be realised by head teachers having local autonomy. So head teachers and governing bodies of those schools knowing the children and young people in their community, knowing what the needs specific to those children and young people are, and being able to look creatively within their community and within the school community to support their learners. It also means that head teachers can act responsively to any needs that are arising or changing, and again they can customise to the strengths that they have within their schools. It also means that there's equity across the county. So we know there's areas within the county where there's higher deprivation and higher ALN needs, and the funding will be focused to support those needs across the county where it's needed. Sarah, if you don't mind, thank you. So to make these suggestions, we've looked at ALN funding across Wales, and a high proportion of local authorities use a similar methodology to what we're proposing, and that is delegating the majority of the funding directly to schools. When we've spoken to officers in other counties, they said that there were some challenges to start off with, and it took schools a little while to get used to this new system, but actually the benefits have been significant. And what they've said is that schools see the benefit of being able to manage their universal learning provision and their additional learning provision themselves. They've benefited from being able to make long-term plans. So instead of having to employ, for instance, teaching assistants on fixed-term contracts, they may be able to employ them on longer-term contracts which means they can plan for future cohorts better. And so staff retention has been increased because staff have got that stability within their roles, within their jobs, to look long term. So those are some of the things that have been reported to us from other local authorities that have moved to this model. We move on, please, Sarah. Georgia, didn't know whether yourself or Mary wanted to come in and just speak about this graph.
Yes, Giacomo, thank you, Simon. So in the secondary funding formula, the notional ALM funding was linked to a 1 to 15 model. So the blue line tells you how much schools currently get, if you like. What sort of came out of these discussions was that the ALN and EFSM is lumped into this 1 to 15. It's not separated. And obviously you've got children with ALN that aren't from deprivation, children from deprivation that don't have ALN, and all of the other elements there, and some that do have both needs. So what we looked at was what the actual current funding is, which is the blue line, and then we've looked at the schools as to the ULP equivalence, for example, is the grey, so that's the universal learning provision linked to ALN, and then the yellow is the EFSM numbers within these schools. So we felt that this model, this diagram rather, would show you the differences there and how this would be switching between schools and changing what they get. So you can see the differences between some of the schools and how much money that they would get if we separated it out. So this was part of the consultation document and the information we shared with schools and with head teachers and chairs of governors when we had a finance meeting with them. Mari, is there anything additional to add to this regarding this graph?
No, I think you summed it up really well, Georgie. I think the main thing really was just to demonstrate how the current funding doesn't really follow the indicators of need, really. It was based on learner numbers solely and not whether or not they had additional learning needs or were from a disadvantaged background. So which was kind of the driver for making these changes as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I could just come in there then, because
Yeah.
I find it a confusing graph. That may be just be me, but so if we were to draw in a line in relation to the adjustment of funding, that would take into account the peaks and troughs in the individual schools or not?
Yeah, and one of the things that we talk about later is around phasing it in. So we're not suddenly going to be taking this funding away from schools either. So what we collectively do currently is we fund them just by joining everything together. But this would enable us to sort of, you can see the difference in potentially EFSM or ALN in some of our schools. They're well above the blue line. And that's what had come through with the discussions with heads as well.
So if we were to take our school Sam Watling as an example, you know, their blue line is way above their need.
Yeah.
But they're going to see a significant reduction in their funding now.
Yeah, they will. And that was one of the reasons is that we did so much around sort of messaging and transparency, was because it will affect some schools, but it obviously will affect them in a positive way, some schools, and it will affect others not so positively. And that's why we'd phase it in if it was successfully agreed. I think the other element there is that we spoke to all heads as part of a finance meeting and their chairs of governors around these proposals to change. We did also obviously put out the consultation document. We ensured that we contacted all heads about it as well. So everybody got their voice heard as part of this consultation. And it comes back really to Simon's point about the original decision for the change was the moral decision. And then we've had to look at elements of this with the finances. And as you can see, you know, some schools that needed more money weren't getting it in the old formula. And some that were getting more than they needed will be affected. They will be affected by the changes.
So the funding per individual pupil, though, that won't change.
No, but they're not funded in that way currently. Okay. They're funded just as a 1 to 15 group amount of money.
Right. Okay.
So yes, it is about individual learner needs. So that is why it would shift to this of the amount of children that need ULP or local authority support, etc., with ALN, and also those EFSM numbers. So It was a sort of standard approach, 1 to 15, that had been in place quite a long time. But actually, as we've come out of the COVID pandemic and listened to schools, we know that we've got some schools now that are managing quite severe levels of deprivation that they weren't before, and also the ALN need. And it is about then our schools being really clear on their figures, if you like, and we gave them indicators to help them generate their sort of feedback in the consultation, because any head teacher worth their salt knows their EFSM numbers, their ALN numbers, they know that detail. So you know, it was really important to link it to the learners and learner need.
Councillor Bryn is looking to come in, but on that comment you've just made, it's very important that the schools have got their data absolutely correct then.
Absolutely, and it is an expectation that schools do that and update that regularly, and we've got the plasks coming up soon where schools, you know, all schools are reminded to ensure their data is accurate and up to date. Good. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch yn iawn. Does na ddim cyfieithu, as no translation, as I assume?
We struggle on a Monday, to be fair. We don't have a translator that works, Bryn, so apologies for that.
Okay. I thought I'd come in early just because it'll help me understand more of the conversations later on, I'm hoping. All pupils return. Well, the school gets funded according to the number of pupils individually. If there's one more pupil, they get that few £1,000s extra per pupil. And then when it comes to additional learning needs, so there was an example up in the paper about the school with about 22 various levels of need, but they don't get funded per pupil with ALN. It's this 1 to 15 ratio comes in. Could you explain that in really simple terms so that I can understand what that really means? I mean, if you get basically, if you had 15 pupils with ALN needs, you could form a class of 15, not that it's done like that, but theoretically, and you could put a teacher in charge of that class for half. Could you? Where am I right or where am I going wrong? Can you explain what that 1 to 15 ratio means?
Yes, this is to do with the notional ALM funding and the processes we've had before, which Simon's referenced. Simon, do you want to come in and explain the detail? Or Mari's popped her hand up, so either one.
So the current formula allows for is the same for each school and for each stream where we've got dual stream schools as well. It allows a first class of 1 to 15 within each year group within each stream. So it gives schools that flexibility, I suppose, to have that smaller group.
But you'd have to have 15 pupils with that need to generate enough money to pay for a teacher to look after that class. Is that right?
No, I think the way it worked was that first there would be funding for that class, that first class of 15, and then other classes were funded at 1 to 30 in the previous formula. And then when we changed that to the per pupil funding, we retained that in terms of the top-ups then and for the notional ALN funding.
What is notional ALN funding as opposed to real ALN funding?
Because it's a formula that sort of we come out with a figure for each school at the end of it, and schools can spend that overall figure as they see fit, really, but we can put in at the front end, if you like, what we think.
So that the county tries to make the money follows the pupils to the school, but once it gets to the school, the head teacher can spend it how he likes, she likes, or whatever. Yeah.
And the governing body, yes.
The other thing here, Councillor Bryn, is that the ALN and EFSM was put in together for this model, 1 to 15. So, you know, this proposal is to separate that back out as well, because EFSM needs funding ALN needs funding. They can't, you know, the way this was is that it was all lumped in to the 1 to 15, those children with ALN and EFSM within that. But some schools will have potentially more of that number, like you said. So they do get funding in other ways for EFSM through their other grants and things, which you know as a governor.
Yeah.
So, but it is about that opportunity to sort of try and ensure that it follows the learner and goes with the learner more. Also, Simon throughout the year has panels where people come forward with need, etc. And then it's on a fixed term process and it comes back and gets reviewed. So this would give more longevity for schools and autonomy.
Okay, but where, if this idea around up to 15, does that mean that if you had up to 15 pupils, the school would get a fixed set amount of money, and it doesn't matter whether you got 1 or 14, the school would get the same amount of money? Is that right?
In this model, yes.
In the old model.
In the old
model. So the help that the school gets does not depend on, you know, if you just increase, if you got one more pupil, it makes no difference. But if you got anywhere between 1 and 15, you get a fixed sum of money, and above that you get another fixed sum of money, only be slightly lower. I think I'm trying to understand what goes on. Is that right?
So essentially, the Councillor Bryn, the 1 to 15, you can look at it as if it's an ALM class in each year group.
Yeah.
And it's funded for 15 pupils in each year group with a teacher. But the head teacher doesn't have to put that class on. Right. And it doesn't only fund ALN, so it doesn't only fund those learners with ALN. It also funds those learners who might be considered to be disadvantaged, so EFSM, free school meal pupils. So in essence, the pupils, the learners, weren't getting the funding directly to support them. It was the class that was getting the funding rather than the individual learners. So if the head teacher didn't put a learner within that 1 to 15 class, they weren't getting any funding to support their ALN need. Okay.
I sorry, Chair, I won't hog the time, but and
I understand. I think I can empathise with your confusion as well. So,
well, I'm hoping other people want to ask the same questions, really. But
Simon,
and as I leave, maybe an answer is that 5.1.2 is proposed the top-ups for individual schools, language streams or campuses, etc., as according to the table that follow. Am I to understand that this is exactly the same formula used when it comes to bilingual Welsh medium education?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's heads nodding there, Bryn.
So yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm sure I'll have more to say about that later. But thanks. I won't hog your time.
Yeah, we got Margaret waiting, but just before we move on from Bryn's point, I do share Bryn's confusion there. So the new funding, the formula as it stands, will give greater equity across the service to each individual pupil. And is that what we're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Right, Margaret.
Can I just take a step back from that?
Go on,
because
Margaret.
We had to do something, did we not, to meet the needs of the new ALN Act that came in. So this is what this is. Meeting the needs of the ALN Act.
Absolutely.
And all authorities had to do something. So every Welsh authority, England has done it before us. So rightly, how successful it is, I don't know. But this had to be done, didn't it? So you've had to produce something. I mean, at the moment, I'm looking at it and evaluating it. I'm wondering, but that's the bottom line, isn't it? Because I don't see that anywhere. And this is our response to support schools because they have to take over the responsibility for ALN and other things themselves in a way that they hadn't done before. I am right, aren't I? I'm not completely round the bend.
No, you're absolutely right. And the next slides talk through that as well, around what we're trying to do to help this realise the ALM reform. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go on then, Georgie. Move on to your next slide then.
Simon, over to you.
Yeah. So, Councillor Margaret, you're absolutely right. So, we haven't done this necessarily specifically for the ALN Act, but
No,
it does go
but
some way
something
to.
had to be done for that, didn't it?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, in the new ALN Act, in the Additional Learning Needs Act, there are two new statutory documents. So there are school individual development plans, or school IDPs, and there are local authority individual development plans, or LAIDPs. Within the current SEN system as it is, there is only one statutory document, and that's the Statement of Special Educational Need, and that's owned by the local authority and funded separately via a banding element. So we will provide schools with a nominal amount of money on top of their delegated ALN budget. In the new system, there are two statutory documents, as I said, the Local Authority Individual Development Plan, and those are the learners who previously really would have had a statement, so the most complex levels of need. So, for instance, all of our learners within a special school will have a local authority IDP. But the school individual development plan is new. And as Councillor Margaret absolutely correctly says, schools are now legally responsible for the content of that individual development plan, whereas previously they weren't. So we've looked at how we can support the schools better in making sure that they can deliver what they're writing into those individual development plans, and how best to fund that. A third level, which isn't statutory, is called universal learning provision. And universal learning provision are for those learners who aren't classed as having additional learning needs, but do require some kind of additional support. And what we've decided is to give, again, a notional amount of money for that, so schools can put in intervention groups, target groups, things like that, which some other local authorities aren't necessarily doing, but we've decided to do that. So the way we've worked it out, and these figures are only based on modelling to date, so these won't be the final figures at all, they're just indicative figures while we were doing some modelling. But what we're suggesting is that every pupil, every learner that has some form of universal learning provision, the schools will get a nominal amount of £200 per learner. For every learner within a school that has a school individual development plan, we're suggesting that they are awarded £2,800. And then for every learner within a school that has an LAIDP, we're suggesting a nominal amount of £10,000. Now, of course, the pot isn't increasing. The pot is the pot. So if schools do decide that they haven't added pupils, learners to the correct plan, and we have a significant increase, then those numbers, of course, will go down. But we do have a robust quality assurance program in place where we are looking at the numbers, we're looking at the details within those plans and making sure that any changes that are made are appropriate, and working with the schools on that. So that's our suggestion to date. What I would say is that those figures, although indicative, they do give the schools more funding per pupil with ALN. So the local authority IDP, no school, unless they're a special school, would get that level of funding in the current formula than they would in the new funding formula suggestion. So we're saying that if a maintained school has a child with a local authority IDP, they will get a significant amount more funding than they would in the current system. Likewise, on school individual development plans, that £2,800 is a significant increase to what they may get in the current system.
And Simon, we're right in reiterating that not other LAs have agreed to give to ULP, but we felt we should from feedback to schools.
That's right, yeah. So some other local authorities as well have decided that ULP, Universal Learning Provision, is what schools should be providing anyway as part of their quality first teaching, their differentiation within the class. But what we've recognised through speaking to schools is that there is still some level of support in addition that they're giving to children and young people. And although it's a nominal amount, if you do have a class with 5 or 6 learners who are having ULP, then you're getting kind of £1,000 to support that small group, for instance.
Okay,
Are you happy if we move on? Councillor
Simon,
Thomas?
we've got a couple of questions there. If you're happy to pause for a minute, we got Councillor Bryn and Councillor Allard.
Oh, yeah. What does it take to get a local authority individual development plan? Because a sum like £10,000 could be a massive game changer in some situations. I'm a governor at a school where there's a pupil, for the sake of inclusion, and that's incredibly important, effectively needs one-on-one support. And at the moment, it looks like the school can have to fund it themselves. Well, they can do it for a year or two, but it's not going to last. It's going to. But if they could get an LAIDP, that would make a heck of a difference. Now, where are we at with assessments for these? Because I mean, to be fair to the head, she's tried to get a response from the county and can't, for the love of money, get attention for this pupil, and it looks like, to me, that it feels like there's like that if you need to unlock that, and how can that be done? What's the system, and what level of additional help opens the door to that kind of money?
So the LAIDP, as I said, is for those the most complex and severe needs within the county. And what the Additional Learning Needs Act and Code says is that there is a test for whether a learner is, if I can use the word, eligible for an LAIDP. So schools need to provide information, evidence of how that learner meets the test, the 2 tests for having an LAIDP. So that's all in statute, that's all in law, and we work towards those. So we have a panel, a multi-agency panel that looks at all the information that's supplied to us by schools and then makes a decision on whether the level of need is at the level that meets those 2 tests.
And to your knowledge, is that panel, is there a waiting list? And how long?
So within Powys, I should say that we're the only local authority in Wales, as far as I can see, that currently has increased the numbers of local authority individual development plans. So what other local authorities have done, they've taken the previously statemented children and they've moved them onto a school IDP and have said to the schools, it's a statutory document, over to you, you write it and you maintain it. Whereas what we've done in Powys, we've really taken the Act word for word, and every child that already had a statement, we've converted onto an LAIDP. So as far as I can see, we're the only local authority in Wales which has increased the numbers of local authority IDPs. We're also the only local authority that I can see that meets weekly to discuss requests from schools. So our panel meets every week through what we call a duty to decide panel. And that panel takes the requests from schools and meets every week to discuss those new referrals. So our waiting list is, well, we don't have a waiting list. When a referral comes through to us, the local authority has 35 working days in order to make a decision on whether it's a local authority IDP, but more often than not, we're making a decision well before those 35 days.
Okay, so they should get a yes or no within a month on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for that, Simon. It's important information, but we are straying a little bit off the formula today. So
Sorry.
no, it's indeed it's a very relevant question and good for information. But if we can keep it to the changes in the formula, that'd be good for today. Councillor Allen.
I better put my hand down in that case. I was
No,
going
go
to.
on, Gavin. Yeah, but I'm not going to curb anything. I'm just go on.
Yeah, no, but it's about gatekeepers as well, and incentives that this could probably cause. You know, we've heard problems in the past, never ending, about the battle to get a child statemented, and etc. etc. Could this, there's clearly going to be very strong gatekeepers in this situation, because there's always boundaries, aren't there, between each. And my slight concern there.
Absolutely, and it was one of the discussions we had as part of this, the changes to the formula. We expect our head teachers and our Elenkos who work very closely with us to know their needs within their school, and also like Simon said, we've got a rigorous program for checking any referrals, etc., and things like that. For us, it's about professional autonomy as well. That's what the schools wanted. They want, the schools with really high levels of ALM particularly really wanted that autonomy to be able to decide what was right in the context of their school. And I think that's important here. You're absolutely right. There is a potential risk if we don't keep track and monitor this really closely, but we are guaranteeing that we will, because this is extremely important for us as an LA, and also for the children with these needs, both ALN and deprivation, if we are going to ensure equity for all.
And
Thanks,
just to add to that, sorry, if I might, although the statutory documents are great because they give protection to families and young people and children, they also come with that responsibility. And if head teachers and governing bodies are putting children and young people onto school individual development plans, for instance, then they legally have to provide what they're putting in there. So the schools and governing bodies need to be careful that they are able to provide what they're putting in those documents.
Good, thank you, Simon. Margaret, once again.
Sorry, just a quick question, really, relating to LAIDPs, in as much as that is a key for those children with very, very significant needs, obtaining that additional funding to the school feel needed to cope with their needs. Now, if that money is not granted, and I'm sure it's done, obviously looked at very closely, what's the legal position after that for the authority or schools? Who's the one that would be in court?
So in terms of referrals to tribunal, the only people that can be taken to tribunal for additional learning needs are the local authority. So schools will never be taken to tribunal directly. It will be us as a local authority that are required to attend tribunal and represent our decisions at a tribunal panel. Schools may be asked to attend as key witnesses, but they would never be asked to be responsible for it. The only time schools would be responsible is if it's a claim raised through disability discrimination, which is when they would be directly responsible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Just before you move from that slide, the headline figure is there that 3.699 million will be distributed directly to schools. What would have happened previously?
So previously we kept, Mary, you might need to come remind me, but I believe it was about £1 million in the pot to pay for any additional children that would come into the local authority. Schools could apply for additional funding through what we called our exceptional resources panel, and then we would delegate that to schools, and then whatever was remaining at the end of the year we would then delegate out to schools through the formula. But what it meant was that schools were having to apply to us and go through a process, fill in paperwork, which took time to apply for that money, and often we had to make difficult decisions on whether we agreed with the request for that funding. So that we're doing away with that, well, we're suggesting to do away with that. It would also mean, as Georgie said earlier, we would have to review it each financial year. So head teachers were only able to offer short-term contracts if they were going to use that money to employ new staff.
Right. So there's greater equity this way around.
That's right.
Yeah.
Councillor Donny.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question about this, the £1 million you used to keep back. What happens if there is a new student appears, come out of county or whatever, or for whatever reason this new student appears? What finances are going to cover that?
So I believe we're, again, forgive me if I've put in the wrong figures, Mary, you'll have to come in, but I believe we're going to hold about £300,000 back for emergencies such as that. So children moving into the county with exceptional needs, or those children who unfortunately may suffer from a life-changing medical condition or accident, and then schools would be able to come to us and we would be able to support them that way.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, there's still a reserve, just not quite as big as it was. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move along the slides then. Thank you.
And this was just another way of looking at the numbers. So saying exactly the same as what we said in the previous slide, but looking at it in terms of universal learning provision equivalence. So just another way of looking at it. Okay, if we just move on to the next slide, please, Sarah. Oh, that was the last slide in this section.
So that concludes the ALN aspect of this, yeah?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there now. The members, Councillor Alid's in.
Sorry, Chair, I was a little bit late joining the meeting because of problems with my laptop. When I joined, you had a chart with 2 bars and one line. That wasn't in the paperwork, I don't think. What was the significance of that? I didn't quite understand it. I don't know whether you can go back or
Was
not.
that the 1 to 15 chart?
Yeah. Mari, do you want to come in?
There we go.
That's the one.
Yeah, sure. So I think with this slide, what we were trying to demonstrate was that the current system the funding doesn't follow the need necessarily between schools, particularly in the secondary sector. With the primary sector, we were already using ALN indicators and free school meals indicators. The ALN indicators in primary needed to be updated for the new categories in the ALN Act. But with the secondaries, the current formula provides the equivalent of this 1 to 15 funding in each school and, well, in each year and in each stream within each school. So each school was funded in the same way, regardless of the incidence of ALN need or free school meals eligibility within their school. So it wasn't reflecting need within the school, really.
Okay, and the grey bars reflects a need. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. The grey and the yellow bars reflect the relative need between each schools, and the blue line is the 1 to 15 funding per pupil that they received.
Okay.
And Councillor Alid, the grey is the ALN ULP equivalent, and the yellow is the EFSM, whereas the blue is both put together in a 1 to 15 formula.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm just really surprised by the variance. Are those actual what are the 2 scales on either side? Sorry.
So Mari, the difference in these two scales on the left and the right?
So, sorry, I'm going to need to check. So one is the amount per learner of the 1 to 15 funding. I'll just check which one it is.
In the documentation we sent out, Councillor Allard, we had the ALN and EFSM in one bar, if you saw that. So we had the blue line and we had an orange bar. And then following feedback, we separated that bar out further to show the difference between the ULP and the EFSM as well. So in the consultation document, it was all in one bar. But what we've done now is just separated that as well, so that people could see the difference between EFSM and ALN as well in each school.
So that the axis on the left-hand side is the funding per pupil for the 1 to 15.
Yeah.
So the range of that across each school, and then on the right-hand side, that's the ULP equivalents. So I think where Simon showed that last slide, it's converted school IDPs and LA IDPs into ULP equivalents, just so that we can put it on one scale, really, to show that relative need. So say for Ysgol Calan Cymru there, it's got quite a high level of need, but that could be because they've got quite a high number of LA IDPs, but sort of not as high a level of ULP. So the funding then would follow those needs, really.
Okay.
And
then you can see the gains and losses between various schools with the change in the formula.
Yeah,
it's really stark. That's my
So Alex, before you come in, I asked the question that if we were to draw a line in with the new funding proposals, it would reflect the line would reflect better on the graphs, and they confirmed that.
Yeah.
So I've got Councillor Bryn waiting, but Alex prompted a couple of questions which I wanted to ask. Is how are primary schools affected in relation? Is there the same variance among primary schools and also specialist schools as well? How will this affect our specialist schools? And I'm tempted to say with a review of our specialist schools coming up as well, how will this formula affect them?
So we reviewed the special schools formula completely last year, and these changes only relate to mainstream schools.
Okay.
And with primary schools, their funding is already based on ALN indicators and EFSM as well. So they'll see some redistribution, just mainly because the current sorry, excuse me, there's helicopters going over, which the dog doesn't like. So the current formula simply takes the number of learners on the SEN register at each school. So now that we're bringing in the nuances around the ULP, school IDP and LA IDP, then there will be some redistribution within primaries, but it not to the same extent probably as with the secondaries. And I think in terms of the case for change, what we wanted to show was that there was this differential really between how the funding was distributed and where the need was within each school, really.
And the reason for focusing on the secondary is because the ALN and deprivation was put in together as a part of the funding, whereas it's not in the primary.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, to get a school IDP, obviously somebody professional in the school has to assess the pupil. To get an LA IDP, somebody from the local authority assesses a pupil, I guess. What is the universal learning provision? Is that for every child? Who decides what qualifies for that?
Again, the school decides on universal learning provision. So the school will decide that low level support that a child or young person needs. At that stage, a child doesn't have ALN. So it's before that level, before they reach that level of having ALN.
is there some kind of criteria for that, or is it what's to stop head teachers saying they all require ULP?
Again,
would be truly universal.
Yeah, again, they would need to evidence that they're doing something that's additional and different to that they're offering every other child within the class. And they provide what's called a universal learning provision plan. That's a bit like the old individual education plans, old IEPs in the old system, and they'll provide one of those that they'll review.
It would often be to employ a support worker to come in and help them with some reading sessions or something like that, or some.
Yes, it could be that, or it could be you know, a group literacy task or reading task, like you say, Councillor Bryn. Yes,
but
yeah.
the school has to provide. Okay, yeah, thanks, Bill.
Councillor Allen, followed by Margaret, please.
Thank you, Chair, for your patience. Just a couple of questions on that graph. There's usually a link between the two bars, generally, isn't? But clearly that's completely broken on that bar there on that graph, and also the blue line that goes through Ysgol Caron Cymru. It doesn't change direction, and that just happens to be the exact point. That's the only school that the bar doesn't change angle or direction. Is that correct? That's.
I think there are, as I think it was before you joined. Yes, there are connections between learners with EFSM and ALN, but also you have learners without EFSM that have ALN.
Yeah.
And you have, you know, so this didn't enable that, you know, and the 1 to 15 was the belief that all of them would be in one class, where actually, you know, certain ALN traits are very able mathematicians as a former math teacher, and you wouldn't necessarily be putting them in a 1 to 15 class in that subject in a secondary level because of their skills. No. So in terms of the sort of the need for noticing the differences between them, yes, there'll be some children that are both, but there'll be also some children that aren't both. And also, how do those schools have that autonomy? Mari, do you want to come in and Councillor Addy's point around the points?
Just on, it's a continuous line, straight line, isn't it, as you go from Isoderwen to Welsh Bowl?
Yes, I think it just happens to be that's where that data point was for each school. So that's just linking up the data points for each school in terms of that pounds per pupil. There's no
okay, just a quirk in the. Okay, yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I've lost you there for a minute. Margaret, waiting to come in.
Yeah, just a quick question related to primary, as we were talking about primary, because the one I was concerned about, which is early intervention at the youngest age in our primary. And I wondered what had been put in or how that could be dealt with, because it depends on circumstances, but very often, if you have the resource or the fund, you can afford to put in the resource early, maybe you prevent lots of problems later. So I just wondered, is there anything in all that we're talking about and distributing funding that does have some element in it, recognising that early intervention?
Councillor Margaret, if I can come in there, that's one of the reasons we decided to fund ULP as an LA as well, to give that ULP is about early intervention, you know, schools identifying resource that they can put into as a preventative measure or an intervention measure. So that is available to all schools. One of the biggest reasons we looked at the formula was feedback from the primary sector. Some of our schools in the primary sector with significant numbers of ALN really could show the impact this funding was having on their need to deliver. And actually, it was really helpful to go away and look at what would happen if we did this differently. And most of the consultation feedback we had was from the primary sector as well. So I think, as part of this, we've identified and done the modelling that, schools with those higher numbers that need to intervene will be financially better off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I think we're coming to a conclusion on the ALN. The one thing which I'm confused about, and again, it is not up before me now, the figure of 3.66 million or whatever it was, is that pool figure? I understand how the formula is redistributing that, but is that pool figure similar to last year, or is that figure the same or less or more?
It's roughly the same as
Okay.
the current year. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Just before we move on from ALN, then, does the committee feel that we need to make some recommendations, or are we satisfied with it? The one thing which strikes to me is that schools have to be very aware that their data needs to be correct to get this funding, or to have the equity of that funding. I think that's a point that we need to stress, and that the school service needs the schools to know that.
Absolutely.
I'd like to support you there, Gwynfor. I'm surprised that the decisions come from Powys within 35 days on serious cases. It's not the feedback I've been getting from the school. I suppose, and absolutely, that's significant money involved there. Well, on the LAIDP, would make a massive difference to small schools, and it needs to be I sincerely hope that, and perhaps they are, the local authority is responsive and listening to schools who have issues along those lines.
Okay, I'm happy to reinforce that, Bryn, and that schools should be encouraged that their data's got to be correct to do that. Sarah, you're nodding your head, so I'm guessing you're going to confirm that. So Sarah first, followed by Catherine, and then Aled and Simon.
Yes, Chair, we're always reinforcing the need for accurate data, and as Georgie or Simon alluded to earlier, PLASC collection date is tomorrow, and as part of that notification to schools, there was a reminder that different cohorts or groups of learner data is used also by the Welsh Government in terms of funding. So it is essential that schools' data is up to date at all times, and we are continually reinforcing that.
Okay, we'll make comment in relation to that. Are we going to bring Simon in before Aled and Catherine, if that's okay?
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Just to say that we have put in quite a lot of support in terms of helping schools with their data. So as a local authority, we fund our ALNCO cluster champions. So they're ALNCOs from schools that we give additional funding to and training to help support schools with entering data onto the systems appropriately. And we also have our what we call our Tuvy Gateway, which is a front door for all support in terms of anything to do with ALN and inclusion in the county, and schools know they can use that facility whenever they need to if they want to ask advice and guidance. So there's mechanisms in place as well should schools need support in that.
I've spoken to Georgie on a few occasions about this. This is something maybe to do. This is the sort of information that we can update our LEA governors on, so that they're aware of this. We say this often enough, but we have got a route into governing bodies through them. Aled first, please.
Thank you. When does this kick in? And will it be significant swings in funding here, isn't there, I think? So will it be phased in, or will it come in one tranche?
If approved, it'll be phased in, Councillor, over the next couple of years. Okay.
And I was looking back at the charts. Oh, in the notes. Oh, it doesn't label it. The one in the notes where the ALN and free school meals were sort of combined. It looks significantly different there. It looks as though there's there's equal a number of gainers and losers within this. But on the presentation, there's significant variation. I don't know whether you can explain that change, Georgie.
Could I come in with one comment, if that's okay? I think in the graph, because as Georgie mentioned, we were asked to split it, and on the graph that's in the presentation today, my understanding is that the EFSM would actually sit on top of the ALN numbers. That's where they were originally in the graph.
Okay, I know the different scales and things,
for clarity.
Yeah.
Okay. But it gives a very different impression. That's my point.
I think the other thing that changed is that it was in the original chart it was just the incidence of ALN regardless of the complexity of that ALN as well, whereas this new updated chart where we've split it out also tries to reflect the complexity as well. Okay.
And the heads, etc. I've seen that new sort of
yes. Yeah, I think that's the one that was shared with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Catherine, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add my voice as a parent on the other side, having a child currently going through the process of assessment. I think the change to the funding formula is a great thing to give the schools more autonomy. Having sat in multiple meetings with staff members where they have bemoaned the fact that it's very difficult to get access to that any kind of extra funding. I think them having access to it from the start is great. Also want to though then the flip side of that, there is that concern that with that such a large pot as a collective for the LA IDP, I think it's already been mentioned by Councillor Allard, but there is that slight concern that with it being such a large pot and all the same amount, that there is the potential that it could be harder to prove or go through the hoops needed to gain the LA IDP. And I would dispute the timescales of 35 days to get an answer about that. Myself and my daughter have been waiting months already for that. So it's to say 35 days, that might be for an initial answer of a response to then get some meetings in place, but that's not the reality of releasing funds or whatever. That's not a 35-day timescale, is not realistic. My daughter's now in year 8 and we've been going through this for the past while since she joined the school. So I don't want to, this is not the time for airing personal stuff, but just from the other side, if you like, I think it's great, but I think I would have concerns that it could impact on how those LA IDPs are rewarded, if you like, in the first place.
Okay, yeah, we grasp that comment, Catherine, we really do. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that it's really important that we say that although we want to delegate the funding to schools, the local authority is not delegating its responsibility. So we are really aware of responsibilities under the Act. So I really want to give those assurances that it won't make it any harder to get LAIDPs, because the code and the Act stipulates the decisions that need to be made and how they're made. So certainly not delegating responsibilities at all from that point of view. And also, if I can help anyway, please do get in contact and we can have a discussion about anything that's delayed any decisions. Please do make contact.
Thank you.
That's very relevant for Catherine and Bryn. So please take up Simon's offer there. Councillor Bryn, the last comment on ALN, please. Your microphone, Bryn.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, interesting to hear what Catherine said there. And I think we mentioned in previous scrutiny meetings that there's not a lot to disagree about the principles of what you're trying to achieve with the alterations to the formula, etc. but we are only getting your point of view, really. It'd be interesting to have head teachers on this scrutiny to give a more experienced opinion on, or opinion of what their experiences of the current formula and how they see it being affected by the new alterations. But yeah, so yeah, just if there's some way of getting some head teachers perhaps involved in this scrutiny.
It's a very, very relevant point, Bryn, and we have spoke about doing some hands-on scrutiny with schools as well, so that may be a point that we can take up. This has been before the school budgets forum as well. There is a recording of that meeting. I think there was I give you an assurance that there seemed to be universal acceptance that this was a positive move, really. But that recording is out there if you'd like to see that, and that that's a head teacher's involvement. But yeah, I think your point's very relevant. We make this point in our meetings that we need to see the hands-on approach from schools as well. So I think it's a very relevant point. So it's a good conclusion. Catherine, you've still got your hands up. Is it a legacy, or have you got another point to make?
Sorry, yeah, no, that's a legacy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll leave the ALM there. I think we've had an interesting debate. I think that's probably the larger part of this, the funding formula. So if we move on to the other aspects as well, we're grateful. So we take us through that as well, please. So we're disadvantaged learners now. So
thank you, Chair. And echoing Simon's comments earlier, the proposed changes are in respect of learner-led funding and equitable funding as well. So the Welsh Government is clear in their review of school spending in Wales, building in evidence, fairness, transparency and clear expectations, recognises that there is strong empirical evidence base showing that higher school spending has a larger positive effect on learners from deprived backgrounds and can play a major role in reducing the attainment gap. As a result, the review stated that local authorities should therefore prioritise extra funding for deprivation. In addition to this wide evidence base, it also came from our schools that they felt that there was a need for us to review how this was funded through the formula. So the report outlines expectations in respect of disadvantaged learners. So there's some more statements there from the Welsh Government. And really this document, the report itself has a lot of evidence included within it. I think it's really important to also align to the Powys County Council's objective, so working to tackle poverty in order to deliver better outcomes for those who experience inequality and social disadvantage, and also being mindful of the impact of the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis on learners and their families, which is something which is recognised nationally, regionally and locally. So really combining that evidence base, that response from schools, looking at our own objectives and actually the impact of the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis, we looked at whether something different could be done in respect of the funding for disadvantaged learners. So in the current formula, £200,000 is distributed across all mainstream primary settings based on a 3-year average of their EFSM numbers at each school. The current methodology through the mainstream primary phase formula provides the same amount per learner eligible for EFSM. Doesn't really reference that need for higher spending that we just mentioned when looking at the previous slide. In the secondary phase formula, each school receives an amount to cover the cost of free school meals provided, and the secondary schools will continue to receive that. However, this only covers catering activity and cannot be used by the schools to support classroom interventions or the needs of disadvantaged learners. And there is no equitable distribution for disadvantaged learners in mainstream secondary settings. And actually, we've had a long discussion this afternoon around the 1 to 15 funding formula, where it was encapsulated with ALN funding. So the proposal is to enable schools to support their disadvantaged learners through ensuring that the funding is redistributed equitably across all phases of primary and secondary, using EFSM numbers as an indicator. it's proposed that there's a multiplier introduced as well to increase the weighting of the EFSM indicator as the proportion of the school population that is eligible for EFSM increases. There will be a very nominal agreed allocation for schools that have a 0% instance of EFSM, because we do have a couple of schools, but also it's possible to have an in-year change. So all schools would receive something. And then there are bandings so that the allocation increases as the number of EFSM learners in a school increases. I've gone through that quite quickly. So were there any questions in respect of that, or are there any slides that anybody wanted me to pop back to?
Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Can you go back to the first slide, please, Sarah?
Absolutely, this one here.
Yeah, or was it the next one, actually? Might be the next one. We were talking about tackling poverty, and I was just wondering if you can explain to me how have you started this? You've got started it, or is it something that you are going to do, and how are we going to manage that?
Well, should the proposals be approved, they will be supporting learners who experience socioeconomic disadvantage. So it would directly support that objective that we already have. There's already a wide variety of work that the authority is undertaking in support of that, but these proposals also support it.
So we're going above and beyond then, are we, Sarah? Sorry, are we going above and beyond then, Sarah, are we?
We're ensuring that the funding is learner-led to support those learners who are experiencing socio-economic disadvantage.
Yeah. Do we have any numbers for those, Sarah?
Yeah, they were in that previous slide, the one that we talked about. It was the smaller yellow bar.
The yellow bars. Okay. All right.
And every school should have fully accurate numbers based on the eligibility awarded for the benefit itself.
Yeah, I would like to think we are up to date on that. Thank you.
Councillor Sue, you've prompted Georgie and Councillor Pete to come in, so fire away.
Just to say as well, we've done significant work as an LA with the Child Poverty Task Force, which Sarah leads, and we've also invested in the RADI programme, which one of the secondary team leads as well, where something like this then gives those schools a little bit more autonomy as to how to use that deprivation funding. Maybe it's a TLR for a RADI lead, for example, in a school. So what we've tried to do is make sure that we're sort of dovetailing the work that we're funding as an LA or leading with what schools need. So in my opinion, it is about making it equitable for all and providing those opportunities in those schools, particularly where we know they have those high levels of deprivation, and intervention is the better solution than and trying to intervene with those children and families. We've got family liaison officers as well now in a few of our communities that we fund from a separate grant to try and support this. So as we did this piece of work and we spoke to schools, and schools have been very vocal in all of the feedback as to why we've gone to these changes. Their feedback has led to these changes. When we're talking about head teachers' opinions and things, but they are regularly speaking to us about this, and that's why we proposed these changes. And we also reviewed some of the things. Also, the impact of COVID means that schools are facing different challenges with behaviour, ANN and deprivation that they weren't necessarily experiencing before. So again, it's about trying to give schools that autonomy by changing this formula, particularly in the secondary sector, to bring in those people if needed with that funding. You know, with my previous roles with high deprivation and ALM, we had a group of people that we use that funding to lead and intervene with children and families as much as possible in a hope to help them succeed towards the end of their education, particularly.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that, Georgie. And the thing is, if schools are not upfront with us, then, you know, it all slips behind. But I'm sure you're on top of it, and I'm glad to hear all this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Georgie. Councillor Pete, jump in.
Yeah, we talked about accuracy of data previously, and this is one where we would expect the accuracy to be much better because of the indicator it's drawn from. But there is one concern that I have, and it's shared by officers, is that because the expansion of universal free school meal provision, there may be children that are slipping through the net and their parents are not applying for the traditional free school meal provision. Can't emphasize just how important it is for parents to still apply for under this measure. This is actually a gateway benefit that opens up a raft of other supportive measures for their children. And one of the things I will talk about in Cabinet tomorrow is this, but I would encourage everyone on this call and watching to really strongly promote the fact that just because their children are getting free school meals automatically, that doesn't mean it's not important that they apply for the traditional measure, because it does open up so many other opportunities to help the families in a wider context. So thank you, Chair.
Fair comment, Councillor Pete. How do we get that message out there?
I'll be talking about it tomorrow. It's something that the school service are promoting quite extensively on social media and have been doing for quite a while. But where you as governors are putting out newsletters, any and every means of communication, it's something that we should be using to draw people's attention to this. And obviously the schools themselves, the teachers, they will be aware of children and parents and families that may be eligible for this that might not be applying, and I would encourage them. There is no stigma attached to applying for free school meals anymore in this context. There isn't a case of the child, particularly at primary level, going up and showing a different flag, because almost every child, well, within the next year or so, every child at primary level will have this entitlement as laid out. So just please, please, please apply. It can help you in so many different ways with so many other benefits, not least the uniform entitlements.
Okay, thanks for Councillor Pete. I'm suggesting this is one thing that we should pick up as a committee as well, that we stress the importance of communication. Councillor Lucy, followed by Margaret, please.
Yeah, thank you, Gwynbar. I may have misunderstood this, but I think in the presentation you said somewhere that currently some of the money for the free school meals money is actually to pay for the free school meals, accepting now that all primary school children will be eligible for free school meals anyway. Will it affect a secondary budgets where they perhaps won't be getting the money for the free school meals, or you know, will it complicate matters in that respect in any way?
Come on, Sarah.
Okay, so if I just pop back to the slide there. So currently there's £200,000 which is distributed to primary schools in addition to the funding for free school meals. However, there's no similar amount that's distributed to secondary schools. So this will be additional funding to support those learners in the secondary settings, and also the funding will be more equitable in its distribution and also weighted to recognise schools that have got significant numbers of learners with EFSM and from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just to add on there, EFSM is being used as the indicator to determine the funding, but it is there to support all disadvantaged learners as schools see appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Margaret, followed by Aled, please.
Sorry,
Margaret.
I
No,
wasn't unmuting. Consider this is a very important piece of work, a massive amount of work. People have been involved, and it must, you know, really need to be commended for all the work that's gone into this. And it has to, but so I'm reinforcing what Bryn said about scrutiny being looking and and making sure that we are evaluating and looking closely at this. And I don't see, so I just want to reinforce that, because I think we need to be clear as to how this committee will be involved in the later in ensuring that this is how this is operating from all sides. And I felt that was so important, that there was clarity for this committee, how we move forward in that respect, and reinforcing what Bryn said.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. Sarah, you looking to come back there? Yeah.
No, I wasn't. Apologies.
All right, no, I see you.
My eye, sorry,
Okay.
Chair.
No, go on, Margaret. We understand the point. Yeah, you are right. Councillor Allard.
Thank you. It makes Margaret makes such an important point about reviewing this and making sure that the expected outcomes are being achieved.
Yes.
But just really quickly, the additional funding for secondary schools, where is that being drawn from? Is it coming out of the education budget or elsewhere?
It's part of the overall 1 to 15 pot that we were discussing earlier.
Okay. So that will be coming out. It'll all be in the delegated budget then somewhere.
Yeah. So it's the same in effect, Councillor Allard, it's the same amount of money. We're just distributing it differently and more equitably by changing the formula.
Yes, there's a whole different debate, the size of the pot, isn't it? But,
yeah. And the pot at the moment, our pot is our pot. So, but we needed to distribute it more equitably across. I'm a product of a free school meal child. I'd really echo what Councillor Peake's saying there around that, and I was very fortunate in my education to have that support. So for us, it's really, really important that schools are aware of that and what they can do with that additional funding. But I'd also say some of the feedback we've had about the rolling out of free school meals is actually more children have now come forward through the free school meals that their siblings are getting to put themselves up to be free school meals as well. So we know from families that they've seen the significant benefit of accessing that free school meal, but also this links to the PDG grant, it links to their professional learning grant that schools get, and it also obviously links to any of the other elements of grants that Sarah works on that are coming through, as well as all the work with the Child Poverty Task Force. And the Child Poverty Task Force is very proactive in sharing with vulnerable families what's available. And we've got like a really comprehensive newsletter that's shared, it's printed, it's also given digitally, and all of the various officers in the service that work with the vulnerable families are promoting these opportunities with the families they're working with. So just to give that reassurance around how we're getting the information out to the most vulnerable people that need to hear it.
Okay, I'm guessing we're coming to an end unless Sarah, you've still got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got one more point as
Go
well
on.
to say.
Go for it.
The decoupling of the proposed decoupling of the 1 to 15 will also aid with transparency. So if anybody's asking how much funding supports learners with ALN or how much funding supports learners from disadvantaged backgrounds, it will now be much easier to see.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's useful. Any more questions on this aspect of the formula? If not, we're going to move on. We're having considerable debate, but it's good. And here we go now. We're onto the premises, which is the last element.
Mari's had to go to another meeting, so Jenny's going to then deliver the presentation on the mainstream formula with premises. Jenny, are you okay to unmute and lead this bit for us?
Yeah, I am.
Thanks, Jenny.
So we looked at different areas of the premises funding in relation to the high inflation factors and the varying inflation factors that we're seeing across the board at the moment. We also looked at the early years top up, but there was no statutory difference in the different temperatures for a classroom and the minimum temperature for a early years setting. So that wasn't consulted on at that point. We did detailed modelling of the changes, and it is proposed that the funding rate per square metre for the grounds and premises is revised to exclude the utility costs and any additional costs associated with the hosting and working kitchen, so they can be given as separate top-ups. So there'd be a new standard rate that's applied to all schools for premises funding, which is their general building maintenance, which is a rate per square metre excluding utilities. It's then proposed that the utility specific rate, depending on what the main heating types are, is used for each school. And that's applied at a rate per square metre also. And in addition to that, there's a utility top-up applied to schools with working kitchens to acknowledge the additional cost of running that kitchen within schools. And that, again, it will be applied at a rate per square metre. Those rates are based on current amounts, basically, for all those different elements that we're seeing charged to the accounts. Any questions?
I'm sure there are some questions, but I feel totally confused with those. It took me back to some of my physics lessons. Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, please.
Yeah.
The first one is about the sort of the general fund, and my concern there about the fact that it's the same rate for all schools based on the per square metre is where you've got schools that are in a poor state of repair as against a school that's very new and modern. Surely if you've got a school that's in a poor state of repair, there's going to be maybe, well, there will be big maintenance jobs, but there may be a number of smaller things that the schools have to pick up themselves that makes it more expensive for them to keep going.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on if you want to answer that one, Jenny.
Yeah, so within the current formula, there is a top-up based on condition factor for all schools, so that's to remain the same. So you will still receive a top-up depending on your condition factor outside of these.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing was that on the kitchens, would it not be more appropriate to have the cost based on the number of school meals that the kitchen produces rather than the area of the kitchen? Because you could have a kitchen that's historically quite a large kitchen for the amount of meals that's produced, or I suppose vice versa, you could have a small kitchen that's struggling to produce lots of meals, but surely that would have a bigger impact on their running costs than the size of the kitchen, because you could have a lot of empty space in a kitchen.
Yeah, we did look at that, and there wasn't a significant difference between costs depending on the number of meals. So I think the main cost is in turning the cooker on and things like that. So we did look at all different ways of doing it, and this showed the fairest way, really, in terms of getting that money to where it's needed. But we did look at the amount of meals they produce, and it surprisingly wasn't impacting that considerably.
All right, thank you.
It's an open-ended question, but what do schools feel about this? Because there's such a differential in premises. What's the reaction from schools to this? Really, it's relevant to Bryn's comment previously, is that we're not grasping what schools think about it. Sarah.
Yeah, as with the other two elements, this was again based on comments from schools, whether it be those with cooking kitchens or whether it be those with different types of fuel. So we did try to accommodate that feedback from schools around difficulties they were experiencing.
Okay. Any other questions? No.
Are we talking about the whole all three aspects now, Gwynfor? Or...
Yeah, no. Let's do that. If we're happy to move on to that.
Yeah. Okay, Joe. The first question is who? I'm just looking at the priorities chosen by the formula working group, and that concerns me really. They've come up with three priorities: ALN, yeah, and deprivation and premises. All valid subjects, but they were who came up with these priorities? Was it the formula working group?
No, it was feedback from head teachers.
Okay.
So it was feedback from head teachers, things that we'd captured through various conversations with head teachers. We did we do a head teacher perception survey, but also we've done quite a few sessions with heads face to face and captured through notes on tables and discussion, particularly around well-being, barriers to well-being. So ALN came up with that, funding came up with that. So that's where these came from.
Okay. Who represents the Bilingual Welsh Medium Education Forum on the formula, schools formula group?
On the schools formula group, we have got representation from different schools through governing bodies or head teachers. But what we are doing now for the next year is also reviewing the membership of that group as well, because we've identified the need to have coverage from all schools, and in some cases we haven't. Yeah, well, because my concern is, and I've raised this before over a couple of years, is that if trochi and Welsh medium education is to be achieved within Powys, it has to be considered by the funding formula. I mean, I don't want to give people a history lesson, but if you want to work out how the Welsh language was removed from the society in Wales, you just have to look at the way the education system was funded and formulated 100 years ago, and has been more or less ever since in the same manner. There's I've raised this with as many people as willing to listen to me. Trochi needs to be reflected in the school funding formula as a means of, if it isn't, it's not going to happen. And I think that's a huge missed. Well, it's just missing. I mean, we've got to change the system in the education here to create bilingual children, which apparently is the aim. It's got to be reflected in the formula in order to make it happen. And I think that's it's a terrible omission. The chair of the forum and the vice chair both connected to bilingual schools. So both the chair and the vice chair of the forum are. Well, yeah, but what we see here is a means of what all head teachers want is to be able to deliver what they're already delivering with more money to make it more effective and more easy. The trochi doesn't exist within Powys as it needs to exist, and it's it's the same as the NHS. The NHS wasn't created by doctors. The British Medical College were against it. It was created by politicians who had some vision, and that's what we need. We need some vision to and make sure that the formula drives forward bilingual provision within Powys. Because if we're looking at equity, it doesn't exist for Welsh medium learners, bilingual learners in school. Plenty of schools that I know, and the very fact that the Welsh medium stream is funded on a 1:15 medium ratio effectively means you need. I was trying to work out from the table. One of the tables, it takes something like 15. You get half a teacher. You get half a teacher, half an additional teacher for every 15 children who apply in the system. How is that going to help drive on Welsh medium education? It basically, you need to assume that bilingual education is the norm, and if all the people who are the 80% of kids in Powys who are not bilingual due to the failure of the primary school to provide bilingual education to them, and if you treated them as the ones with additional learning needs, they'd get effectively two extra teachers to make sure that they could all speak English. The idea of trying to achieve equity just doesn't exist. It needs to be included in this system somehow, and it needs to be looked at very, very quickly, because we're trying to achieve that in schools where I'm a governor by September, and as you know already, I've had a discussion with you. We seem to be getting nowhere very quickly with that. I know
Okay.
Jenny's here. Jenny's here, but I think we do fund the 1 to 15 for the Welsh medium stream, but it's 1 to 30 in the English stream.
Yeah,
So,
it's
we
but
do fund them
100% of the English stream they get all their education already through. This is not for you to answer, to be honest, Georgie. It's one for the councillors and the and effective the portfolio holder, I guess. There is no equivalence. Even if you enter your child into a Welsh medium education at schools local to me, you're lucky if you get 50 or 60% of their lessons through the medium of Welsh. Anyway, sorry. Perhaps somebody wants to follow on.
Your point's made. The portfolio holder is listening, and it needs to be raised with the formula review group. Really, it's a consideration, and if it's a direction for this committee to do that and raise it with the group, that's the way it should be done. But as I said, the portfolio holder is listening, and he's put his hand up.
Yeah, I'm Trocky and making it work is one of the biggest challenges that we've got, because there is demand dotted around the county, and getting the provision there so that demand can be met is quite challenging at the moment. I take your point around embedding it into the formula review. It is a possibility, but I would highlight that we do have a Welsh medium element already within the formula at both primary and secondary level. And maybe it is a request that could come from this committee to the wider group, the school budget forum, for them to take that on board as part of their deliberations now onward, to bring forward recommendations at this stage in the process next year, because obviously they work on a particular timescale which is set out by statute, and we need to have this decision taken now so that the funding formula for the next academic year is in place.
Okay. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I'd like to support what Bryn was saying around that. Clearly, the funding formula is not driving the change at the moment. It just tweaks around the edges of the existing status quo. If you want to drive change, it won't be the heads in individual schools. They will be looking at their day job rather than at the long-term stuff. So it's a political element that has to come in here to make, demand change and drive that change. If we just sit back, it just won't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Certain acceptance with all them points. That's good. Anything else, members?
The last slides, Chair, are just about implementation. That's all, just so everybody's reassured of the fact that it will be phased. So changing to the distribution method will cause changes to individual schools, total funding, and there can be a risk of significant redistribution if the proposed changes are significantly different from their existing distributed methodology. And how this is managed is key to a school being able to ensure continuity and smooth transitioning for the staff and their learners. So should a school need to make staffing reductions as a result of this redistribution, then sufficient time needs to be allowed to support that. It's proposed then that the implementation of the proposed changes will be staggered over 2 years to mitigate this risk and minimise disruption. So that will give the schools the opportunity to review the impact of the new distribution methodology during the first year, and us as well. And it's proposed that the proposed changes for the distribution are funded in phased as follows. So year 1, 50% of the new, 50% of the current, and year 2 would be 100% of the new. So we would phase this in over the next couple of years if successfully agreed the changes. I think from our perspective, we are very aware of the impact on certain schools because we did this as part of our modelling. But also it was one of the reasons why we were so transparent in sharing the proposals with our heads and chairs of governors in as many fora as possible, because we wanted people to potentially work out themselves and contribute to the consultation.
Thank you, Georgie. I'll let you. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It's good that you've sort of driven the figures through the funding formula and seen the consequences. Can you give it in pounds the swing on the plus side and the negative side? No naming of schools or anything like that, but just give the range of figures for, I guess, at high schools, because there's much larger numbers there. What difference does it make on the positive side, and what difference to make on the negative side? Thank you.
Oh, hang on, everybody's disappeared on my screen. Oh, we're back. I don't know specifics by school, but we can certainly get that information for you, as in the highest and the lowest in the secondary sector. What I will say is I know from one of the schools that we worked with on a financial deep dive, who really was to the bone in terms of the only one really that we couldn't identify savings in, is now financially better off with these changes in the secondary sector. So we know that detail, but I obviously don't know the detail of the range but we can gather those figures for the scrutiny panel. That's not a problem at all. We've looked at specific schools and things as part of it, and we're aware of the schools that we think will be affected the most.
It's interesting that's where that deep dive has occurred. It's seen a really positive upswing.
Yeah, from the
two things related at all or not?
Not necessarily, no. From the 6 deep dives, we've identified common themes, as you know, and we're working with schools on those, and all but one could make significant savings, in all honesty, to help with their budget planning. The one that we just couldn't find any more potential savings also happened to be one of ours with significant deprivation and ALN, and the formula changes will benefit them.
Okay, thanks. I did put that question in the chat at the side around the table in Appendix A. I can't see how that's been translated into the table that was shown on the presentation, the chart on the presentation. It'd be great if we could have the presentation, and also, well, you can give me a reassurance that those figures within that Appendix A have been translated directly across to that graph, one of the bars and the lines.
They were taken, as in terms of on the presentation, we reference where they were taken, when they were taken. So from Tubby, for example, for the ALN at that point in time, the PLASC is now the next snapshot that will then feed into the formula. So, we did it prior to, as part of the consultation, so we could have figures to generate, but then we've reinforced the schools to ensure their data is as accurate and up to date at all times as part of this. But like I said to you, I know the detail of 6 of the deep dives because we've done 6, and I do know that one will be benefiting from these changes, and it is one of our schools with high levels of deprivation and ALN.
Okay, if you could send out the presentation, because I just missed the beginning. Apologies.
Okay, no worries.
Or my laptop's fault, anyway. Thank you.
Okay, are we content that we've concluded this item? As I mentioned, it's going before Cabinet tomorrow, and I think there's a couple of pertinent points that we need to make. I can't attend. I wasn't there, no. I can't attend tomorrow. I think it's important to make the point about in relation to data and the accuracy of data. And I think there's acceptance in relation to Bryn's comment in future reviews in relation to the Welsh language. Are we happy to send a comment over, or would you like to request that Lucy goes along and makes a comment? Because I can't attend tomorrow, so I'm not sure of Lucy's availability, but how would you like to approach that?
I can't do tomorrow, Gwynfor, unfortunately.
Okay. Are you happy that we send a comment over through CAP in relation to them 2 items?
I'd like to understand in cash terms what it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Impacts.
Okay. If you want to formulate some kind of question in relation to that, we'll certainly get it across. The one point that I've been reluctant to make all the time, but it's very relevant to all 3, is and I can't cheekily ask the question: is the pot enough to deal with these aspects? I would suggest that ALN deprivation on premises, that yes, the formula deals with this, but the pot of money isn't large enough to cope with it all. I seem to be freezing, am I? Or am I coming through?
There's a terrible echo, Gwynfor. I can't struggling to understand you.
Okay. For some unknown reason, I've started freezing. I don't know why. Okay. Okay. You're happy that we put something together for cabinet tomorrow on reflections of what have been said.
Yeah, happy with that.
Did you pick that up then?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll move on in the agenda. Thanks for everybody who's contributed to that. I think we had an interesting discussion. Thank you very much. I'm just looking through my agenda now. Item 7 on our agenda is our work program. It's there before you, and you will note on it. Let me just bring it up. Happy for anybody to make suggestions, but if you see from March onwards, we put school visits, deep dives. Previously, we spoke about trophy as a deep dive. I'm happy to have subcommittees. I'm in your hands, members. Once we've concluded the budget, our work program can be populated with any of your own ideas, etc. It's there before you. Any suggestions?
Gwynfor, what were we going to have on Wednesday? Because I thought we were having an extra long, I thought were then going to have an extra long meeting today to cover what we were going to do on Wednesday, but I couldn't remember what it was we were going to do on Wednesday.
Cass going to jump in now and help me out on that one.
Yeah, Councillor Lucy, we were going to have progression and learning post 16 and an update on transformation, but due to various officer time, whatever, it wasn't able to add those in today because we'd had a discussion with the director earlier last week, Councillor Gwynfor, myself and Lynette Lovell, and it was thought that the discussion today might take a little bit longer than the hour and a half. Right. So really it wasn't, we'd have been here for quite a while. So those items have been postponed to the 20th of March.
We lost a date in relation to we earmarked when one of the budget meetings because of the appointment of senior officers in the calendar as well.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so that's quite a long delay in a way for the school transformation update, isn't it? But perhaps not much is going to happen between now and then.
We did request, Marianne hasn't got anything to bring before us at this present time.
That's fine.
Okay, but I'm happy for that work program to be populated in any way whatsoever. Do we want to have them working groups? Do we want to have the school visit? Do we want to have some deep dives?
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't quite hear what you said. It was in duet.
I'm not sure what's changed here. The same broadband, etc. Just encouraging people to populate the work program. We want to have some committees or whatever to do some school visits, do some hands-on visits, or some deep dive. Would you like to do a bit of work on trophy to improve that?
You're muted, Bryn.
Should have a field trip to see where it works successfully.
That's a good idea, Bryn.
Yeah, interesting.
Some secondary school somewhere.
Doesn't have to be a physical field trip, but
yeah, it certainly can be a deep dive. Do we want everybody involved in that, or do you want to create a subcommittee? Margaret, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got my hand up because I'm still not clear, but I don't think it's quite in relation to what we've been discussing now. But what I still don't feel that I've got clear understanding of post 16 because Eru's gone and we were working with Ceredigion. And I knew all about that, and we were sort of moving along. And now I have no idea. Now, it's maybe me, I've missed something in a meeting, but I really do feel that's an area that we need to look at.
Okay, post 16 was to be in our next meeting, but so yeah, we need to keep that on the agenda then in relation to that comment. So we can certainly do a piece of work on that, can we, Georgie, and bring that to us? Yeah, nod of the head there. So we'll get that into the work program. We'll do a deep dive in trophy. Full committee, or do you want to have a subcommittee, or how would you like to do this?
Gwynfor, with just thinking about the post 16, would that be an occasion where it would be interesting to perhaps have a couple of heads from, you know, who've got different size sixth forms talking to us about how it's working for them?
I would like to do that, yeah.
I'd like a full committee for Drochi. I think we just need to disseminate the understanding. Really, I don't think it's permeating into powers at any particularly high speed.
Yeah, okay then. I'm going to say yes to Lucy's suggestion. I'm going to say yes to Bryn's suggestion. We'll try and populate this into the committee and get things worked through. Anything else in relation to the work program?
Can I come in, Gwynfor, about that?
Go on.
With the post 16, can we have some facts and figures with it, if it's possible to produce them, as to where our students are going? Are they staying in Powys? Are they going, you know, because we've got such movement? I don't know. And how is that monitored over years? Because I know, you know, a big change came in my area when there were more trains from Caersus, because people could go to Shrewsbury more easily. So I don't know, but I do think we need to look at where they are going. You know, those figures and facts should be part of what we are presented with.
Margaret, I'm going to suggest Georgie's going to nod her head to this and tell me the data is available, Georgie.
Yes, we've got a whole chunk of evidence and research around the provision, the outcomes for post 16. We've shared it with the SMB, so I think it'd be really beneficial for this scrutiny to see that information. We've done quite a significant analysis of post 16 provision.
Good. That's a yes to that then, Margaret. Are we all happy to move on?
Yeah.
Good. That brings us to the end of our meeting today. I think it was quite a useful meeting, actually. Good contributions from everybody, so thank you very much, members and officers. And if members want to stay on after, we can have a bit of a reflection if they would always. But thank you everybody for their attendance today. And get ready for our budget round, which will be before we know it. So any comments in relation to how you want to discuss the budget, please share them by email, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate it. So, but thank you very much for everybody. Much appreciated for today's attendance. Thank you.